Somos Radio TV con Estilo no se hace responsable por los conceptos emitidos en el siguiente programa por sus moderadores y sus invitados.
Hello, how's everyone? How are you doing? Greetings from this blessed land of the United States of America. Greetings to all my dear friends, brothers who are tuning in at this moment, because you all know that we are going to talk about a super important topic with the very Dr. William Jimenez Gaviria. And the topic is, let's talk about asylum. The things we're going to talk about at this moment are very important. There are many, let's say, lacks of information when you apply one of the things that the book Asilo Derecho Humano says very clearly, which is available to you for 99 cents on Amazon.com. A gift for you from me, courtesy of my love for you. You also use everything that has to do with your reality. Always be coherent when you are telling your story. Among other things that we are going to talk about right now with Dr. William Jimenez Gaviria. Welcome, dear doctor. Thank you once again for being there, and with pleasure to the entire audience.
Good evening. Thank you very much for being here again in this important window, and well, we are available to contribute to the space and the audience.
Sure. Thank you very much, Doctor.
The topic is very timely because it turns out that human rights in situations, new elements that are generated, circumstances that sometimes were not foreseen, lead us to the fact that the states, the interested parties, the human rights activist organizations review how we have to adapt to new trends. Because for decades and since this important manifestation, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, has existed, there are 30 articles contained therein where a whole range of guarantees are integrated. So we have seen situations. In fact, I also want to take advantage of the opportunity from a referential point of view. But to talk about a case that caught my attention, by the way, I saw an interview recently in your space with a Venezuelan citizen, and to see that it is a topic that worries me. It is a topic of interest. And because although it is true in a traditional way that a person flees a country because their life is in danger, because there are no guarantees, the state does not have the guarantees designed to protect their physical integrity. Here we have new elements where the situation or circumstances, even being outside the territory, also generate new moments where there is no exception that the person is not at risk to life, and even more so when the person is exposed. It is manifest because, in the case of Venezuela, there is enough precedent for cases of connotation of relevance. For example, by the simple act of writing on any social network. There is a very well-known newsworthy case such as the account of a person called Inesita La Terrible. She made some comments on her account and immediately went directly to the civil. And this is what happened to a great friend who now has protection in Spain, Leonel Sanchez Camero, with a Twitter account, which by the way, both he and I manage anonymously. But well, they came from him. And in the 4 years, and so they have passed with a lot. But this fact is not only a particularity in Venezuela due to a system that we already know clearly violates human rights, but also those Venezuelans who generate public positions of repudiation against the system of criticism towards the authorities. They do not need to know that if tomorrow they go to Venezuela, the mamonras of tyranny await them, a prison awaits them. And I think that's the point, opening this space here, right?
Yes, while also clarifying, and thank you for that openness. Notice, there is a provision in the refugee protocol that says that the person cannot be returned to their country of origin when they are afraid, and show and say that they are afraid of returning. That is called non-reinforcement. It is a provision that obviously the countries agreed to, and in this case, well, as I think you are referring to the case of a fellow Venezuelan who is in Norway. Norway signed and ratified the refugee agreement, the refugee convention, and the convention also its protocol, right? So yes, however, some countries do not necessarily have to comply with certain provisions because they did not sign the agreements, although it is tacit that their obligation is moral to also comply with those agreements that they have not signed when they are in favor of man. And that's why it's called the pro homine provision, right? In favor of man. Whenever this resource is in favor of man, it is internationally recognized that even though the state has not signed that agreement, that convention, it is bound by this pro homine norm.
Homine, no?
And you'll tell us about just cushion too, right? Because they are international standards, and international protection is above national law. It's certainly, look, here in the United States, about 5 or 6 years ago, there was an additional regulation that has to do with the authorities going to review all your social networks. Because it's a question of consistency, right? It's not a question of, and I tell people this a lot, I don't see that. I mean, take that WhatsApp profile away from me. That's what you are. You come here crying, oh, what a poor thing and there you are in a bikini on the beach. You understand? Then there is an incoherence between what you're feeling internally, the pain, the grief, and all this, and the exhibitionism that we have with the issue of social networks. So this is an issue that must be handled with caution, because many authorities can be very wrong when they look at social networks and see what there is. For example, this girl who is wearing bikinis or WhatsApp. Okay, she is pretty, but that is not consistent with your asylum request, and a lot of things will happen that way. The topic of social networks is very complicated, a topic that I would even call new generation, and that when an authority makes a decision, they have to understand that they cannot be carried away by gossip or by what a social network says, but rather that there is a conglomerate of situations. That is why the other day I called for the authorities to, in general, rely on the case of the European Union, rely on the manual and the guidelines of the Istanbul Protocol manual, which is to discover there are a series of measures there of guidelines that in reality, the bottom line is that the country and the authorities can discover if this person has been or will be a victim of torture.
As they have stated, and I fundamentally agree with the assessment you share with us, notice that we already have a precedent with the case of Norway, which was the return of the citizen Gabriel Navas. And that was a quite terrible situation, because I even remember that your person, my person, with the father, with the family, we had to generate a whole noise, a call for attention, a whole concern. We had conversations. And thanks to that and the leadership that the mother did, he went to an organization, we would not have made the public demonstration. That denunciation that people sometimes find important to understand, that it is essential to denounce, to expose when something is happening. Because if a person arrives back at the international airport, if not Bolivar, when the authorities review a person left the country 3 years ago, what was he doing in a country where he does not have that nationality? So what's up? In the case of Gabriel, notice that he suffered torture, humiliation, and atrocious things that we have avoided at the time. Maybe, we will see and explain some things. At the moment, we do not want, the territory, it had to go outside of Venezuela. So, notice that even on Friday, I went to the representation of the embassy in Colombia, informing them of what was happening. And they simply replied to me that they were sorry. Imagine the level of irresponsibility and seriousness that I have with an apology, that I am sorry, on the part of an ambassador. And if that person is executed there, as happened with Counselor Fernando Alvan, who was simply coming from a family gathering, when he arrived at the airport, the Sebin took him, tortured him, and they created a false positive that he committed suicide. And a year after that death, that homicide, that situation, the one who is the Attorney General of the Republic changes the criteria and says that we are no longer talking about a suicide, but rather a homicide. Because the pressure has been so great with the work that we must recognize the independent international mission that is investigating everything related to the violations of human rights in Venezuela, in addition to the work that the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights is doing. But what the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is doing in everything that has to do with international criminal matters, compliance with the principle of complementarity and legality, it is not just anything. It has led to these authorities, the system, the regime that prevails in Venezuela today, having had to change things. And I also had another case quite a while ago of Aymara, a countrywoman from Barinas. She was returned from Panama because I don't know what happened. There was a problem with the visa. Something simple. So according to the regulations there, they don't ignore her, so they send her with a return letter. Be careful. And it wasn't a figure or a political case or any of these things. She barely arrives at the Simón Bolívar International Airport. Interpol takes her, directed by the 6th CPC, where there is an Interpol office there. And there I had to go to the Macuto courts, the criminal courts that are in Macuto, and it was my turn. Furthermore, the prosecutor was surprised. And in the end, the prosecutor said, I don't have a way to pre-qualify here. There is no crime here. So what the prosecutor did was comply with the due process declared, therefore full freedom without any type of restriction. And so it happened. But these are the issues that many of these countries do not understand, because I also speak it for myself, who am a living testimony, and you are also one. Hear how difficult it was for them to consider, to believe that I did have a condition, and that I have it that is permanently life-threatening for me and the family, because this is not a topic that is only frozen. In Venezuela, there is a way that they not only persecute the person they are looking for, but under pressure they imprison a brother, a nephew, a cousin. See what happened with the Junquito massacre. When Oscar Perez was revealed on June 27, 2017, and 6 months later, we saw what already happened on January 15, 2018. They detained Diana Santana, Luis Pimentel's wife, to pressure Pimentel to turn himself in. Remember, Carmen, that Pimentel was the getter, that together with Oscar Perez, he was the co-pilot who displayed that banner that said 350, which is obviously a very shocking event. But notice that Diana Santana stops her. That is a modality. And I have a friend, by the way, a judge of the Supreme Court in exile, that a brother there in Cumana was detained. They detained him to pressure her to surrender. So if we are seeing this level, this scope, imagine a person who has publicly challenged, or rather exposed, has pointed out all the links he has with the Nicolás Maduro regime on issues related to cocaine trafficking, trafficking of weapons, relations with terrorism. I am referring to a person who has publicly denounced Commissioner General Douglas Rico, the director of the Venezuela Scientific Police. What do you think is going to happen to him? And here I go directly with Luis Guillermo Parra, who has had high exposure denouncing Douglas Rico. Okay, Luis Guillermo Parra will know what he is denouncing, okay? But the fact of making those statements, whether they are true or not, Mr. Luis Guillermo Parra Navas is returned to Venezuela. We don't know what their fate will be. I don't think it would be such a favorable destination. I don't even want to imagine being in their position of how terrible and atrocious a person who returns to Venezuela could live when they publicly see. Imagine the content that I have on my social networks of so many of the things that have been denounced. Also, as in your case, you have exposed, and many Venezuelans who have become living testimonies in exile. What will happen if tomorrow they go to Venezuela? Because here is a little detail one sees programs or content that people have on their networks. Well, they have been out of the country for 5 years, and suddenly they return to Venezuela and start talking about how they experienced their travel log, how the airport is, how the road is, how they got home. Cool. But Carmen Jimenez is not going to live that experience. William Jimenez is not going to live it. If tomorrow we each decide to arrive because we want to visit our relatives, or we want to go to our homeland because immediately there in those airports that provide international service, all the organizations are there, and there is data, precise data. Furthermore, they have informed me, because you never stop having those who give you the data, that although many believe and look for a way to verify that some request, some alert does not appear, that does not mean that they have another one in parallel. System. They have their list. A list. We are on a list there. And that list has all the border controls. Even the guerrilla, the National Liberation Army, has a way out.
Of course, without a doubt. Let's go to the responsibility to protect, which is a responsibility that all countries that are within the United Nations have, the responsibility to protect. He called the area formula, which you will remember that our dear Diego Aria was the one who organized this whole issue of the need to protect, to assist citizens, and well from a state. And for that, we deeply thank Diego Aria, among so many things that in his battle, he has achieved at the diplomatic level and at the international writing level. Every country has to protect the people who are on its territory, but it also has to protect its nationals abroad. Venezuela is not doing this, but neither is Argentina, nor Ecuador, nor Peru, nor Colombia, nor El Salvador, nor Guatemala, nor Nicaragua, nor Honduras. No, he's not doing it.
No.
In this case, I'm referring to the European Union. Norway would not be doing it because by not protecting a person who is within its territory and thus its jurisdiction, then and also that he is in an asylum application, which is an international protection, which is above, I insist, national laws, and that an organization based on gossip, based on a photo I saw on the internet, which could be, look, it could be anything. It could be to mislead. It could. You're the one who's clueless, right? It may be that you made the mistake of going out there and taking strategies that are not correct for your case. And that is understandable. But I read the writing that Luz Para sent me, and the truth is that decision that this organization makes from Norway, it's really as if that decision was being made by the gossip on the corner in the Guataparo neighborhood, in Valencia. No, it really doesn't seem like a serious organization. It is noticeable that in his speech, he also does not want to show who the supposed organizations are, what the chimes are, and who gave them to them. That they are recommending that Luis Parra return to Venezuela, knowing, as you are saying, that it would be above the same treaty that he signed by violating Article 33, I think it is, of the new reform, of the new devolution. And furthermore, I also understand from the context of what the writing is, although I have not seen it, the writing that Luis Parra makes in his defense when he requests asylum. But in any case, everything that has happened to him at that request has been very serious for everyone's lives, including obviously the kidnapping of his daughter and the kidnapping of his son, right? The girl has not yet appeared and is presumably in the hands of the ELN or the FARC. It is not known. They do not know yet. So, and apart from what happened to his wife and the issue that has to do with the separation from his children, it would truly be a very cruel, very inhuman decision. And although the treaty against torture is called a treaty to prevent torture, inhuman, cruel, and degrading treatment, he would then be in Norway committing an act of torture if he returned him, and a cruel act separating him from his daughters, which he also says, according to the writing, is indefinitely. That is why I believe that the role of us as human rights defenders, as specialists in the issue of asylum, I believe that we must put our hand in and get to work, because there is very little time left to write in advance of this writing, so that do not make that disastrous decision to return to Luis Parra.
It's not precisely that I want to bring up the topic, but I want to take advantage of this space because it is important to denounce the regime of Nicolas Maduro, which also has its collaborators. And the saddest and most regrettable thing is that there are organizations that defend human rights that are penetrated by agents of the regime, and its directors are unaware. That is, they ignore and are already alerted. Look, I'm referring to the Criminal Forum. The Criminal Forum has engaged in a campaign of discredit, of denunciation, taking advantage of the prestige that this organization has in Venezuela with everything related to political prices. In fact, I have situations, I don't know, it will be to make it professional, rivalry, I don't know what concept, what definition, but I remember that when we were in Caracas, I was in the Human Rights Commission of the illustrious Bar Association of the capital Distrito, and the people who revoked the Criminal Forum were looking for us in the commission. It was not that they were looking for William Jimenez. It seemed to them that the Bar Association could satisfy the expectation for their defense, and it is a right that you choose or you want to revoke your judicial representation. Okay, now the forum with respect to me, I understand the differences that this situation is, but I was surprised seeing what is happening here, especially in Holland, in the Netherlands, and in the Kingdom of Norway. It turns out that I had access to a report that Gabriel Navas sent me, where they are mentioning me, where the Criminal Forum is telling an organization that works in collaboration with the Norwegian immigration system, Landinfo, that William Jimenez in Venezuela delivered to people, that I collected money for human rights activities. I was wondering what's behind all this. Well, later I was convinced because one never stops having one's sources, and I even wrote a public letter to Gonzalo Inyo, who is one of the directors of that organization, and talking about what was happening with Guillermo Parra now, with his representation, because they have a lady there, Sonia Zapata, I think that's what her name is, and they have a representative here in the Netherlands, who, by the way, the representation of the Criminal Forum here in the Netherlands maintains a strong connection with everything the family environment of Rafael Enrique Bastardo Mendoza, one of the officers, along with Alexander Graco Arteaga, who participated in the Junquisto massacre, executing the life of Oscar Perez and the other brothers and martyrs. And I see there that they talk about what they are referring to me and Kara like we charge money. But it turns out that I have a little pearl that we are going to show in another program.
Let me interrupt you for a second, please, because I just read a news article where Foro Penal clarifies that it does not have representatives in Norway.
Well, what I see on Twitter in the official account of this lady, Sonia Zapata, says quite the opposite. She claims to represent the Criminal Forum there. They will have to resolve their matter because it is an internal issue.
I'm going to pass you the link. I'm going to pass the link here privately to the production. So you can see that Alfredo Romero said that in 2020 that they do not have representatives in Norway. This appears in the national one.
So look, at this point they say that William Jimenez was paid in such and such a thing. Aha, I got paid. Who paid me or what the matter was? Because sometimes they speak generically. Landinfo considers Foro Penal's statements about me unverified as true, because I wrote a communication to Landinfo making that claim, and as of today, I have not received a response. Okay, it doesn't matter. Cool. But the truth is that, on baseless generalities, then a criterion is built where a foundation is born to harm a Venezuelan, with the aim of having him returned and handed over to the regime of Nicolas Maduro. Because here I'm going to say it very precisely, and I do not mince words to explain it. The Criminal Forum is the most interested in the Nicolas Maduro regime remaining in the system, so that they can continue boasting on behalf of the political prisoners. Because tomorrow when democracy returns, they will run out of Piquito bread. And the Criminal Forum knows that they have many bare wires, so they are promoting it, because someone who would not want to fall into these issues. But I also have the right to defend myself because they brought elements, insults, defamation, falsehood, or rather statements about me. And well, I wonder what about, because behind that, there must be some interest. I don't know what will happen. What I do know is that the representation of the Criminal Forum, those who are here in Holland, have close ties with the family of Rafael Enrique Bastardo Mendoza. And they know this because I talked to him about it. Luis Armando Perez, I talked about it with Luis Armando Perez. Look, Carmen, there's one thing.
Because Bastard is the one who orders Oscar to be murdered.
Rafael Enrique Bastardo Mendoza, at that time of this issue of the massacre in Junquito, was the major of the National Guard, director of FAVIS, who was talking with Oscar Perez, when Oscar Perez was trying to see if some type of negotiation was taking place there to seek a resolution, because Oscar Perez was willing to surrender. Oscar Perez knew that in the face of a mobilization, a military operation, where there are more than 2,000 men, a person who was tactically trained, who comes from an organization such as the Grupo Baez Scientific Police, knows that there is a level of disproportionality. So look, I admit that I wouldn't have done it the same way. Well, Bastard was there. He is the person you hear when Oscar Perez makes some reflections or tries to see if he arrives during an internment to resolve the matter. And then what is well known to the public is there in the historical records on YouTube, where we see that a rocket, an RPG, hits Chalet. He gives the order, together with Alexander Graco Arteaga, to proceed with the extrajudicial execution. That is why all of these bodies, I who had the opportunity to see them, can see the entry holes, close contact shots, which is the term in criminalistics that people usually call point blank, because you distinguish there in that entry hole what is the so-called tattoo. For everything it generates, what is the gunpowder? Because shots that are not close to contacts do not leave this type of characteristics. So all this already tells you, and what experts in forensic matters are, that in fact these people, there is no doubt that they were all executed after the stunning caused by that neck. So look, Rafael Enrique Bastardo Mendoza's mother-in-law lives here in the Netherlands, and that lady has important ties to the representation of Foro Penal. Then the Penal Forum will have to review its payroll, and I am available. Let him call me Flora Romero.
You and I, defenders of human rights, and many defenders of human rights, I say that the majority of us are persecuted by the regime of Nicolas Maduro and his anti-democratic combo. So I say because nothing happens to him, he comes in, goes out, comes in wheels of press, and nothing happens to him. On the other hand, you and I are persecuted. They don't put it in the news from Venezuela. They don't call us evil. No, the info puts you there as if you were whatever. I have also written to Alfredo Romero to ask him to comment on this issue of Norway, of the Netherlands. And, well, any writing, any note is conspicuous by its absence. Only this type of notes that he makes call for the wheel of press to say that he does not have a representative in Norway. Well, but that was in 2020, right? Let's see what is happening now that the Landinfo says that it accuses you. It accuses you. By the way, you could, as a lawyer, you could open a lawsuit against Norway for defamation and the Landinfo authorities. Obviously, right? Because even though that document is supposedly private, it is not private, look, which is already public, notorious, and at this moment communicational.
Of course, we have already had access. I have been able to see official documents where those Landinfo statements are there, just as you have said, and as we have shared it here, since it mentions me. There they say that and that as I have stated, that I have contacts in the United Nations. The following must be clarified. I belong to the Inter-American Federation of Lawyers, which is based in Washington, United States. I have my credential and my accreditation as such. This corporation is affiliated and recognized by the OAS and the United Nations. I am within the Migrant Refugee Organization in the United States, which is worthily chaired by you and which, as we all know, is public. Anyone can access to verify the organization's registration in the state of Florida. And I appear there within your organization, responsibility in the chapter here in the Netherlands. And your organization is recognized by the United Nations and is recognized by the Organization of American States, where you have been within the team doing important work. You have been invited guests for many of that organizer's assemblies.
We have been strategic allies of the Organization of American States since March 16, but we have not achieved consultancy in the United Nations because it does not allow us to go to Venezuela, Syria. So it is logical, right? And they have not allowed us the consultative status, but we are in that process. We are not going to abandon it. We are just waiting for some other things to calm down a little, to come back and insist on doing consultative again. But at this moment, we are not. But yes. Obviously, yes, we have a very good relationship with ECOSOC and with civil society delegations of many organizations that are our allies. And also our organization, where you are the director for the lower European countries, has links. It is the coordinator, the anti-corruption no for the United States. Let's remember that the coordination by the countries is generated from the year 2018 when the president signed the Lima Agreement and then create us as anti-corruption nodes. And in the year 2020, it was the election among all the NGOs and social actors of the States United. And they elected me on behalf of the USA Refugees and Immigrants Organization, where you are an important board member for the organization and advisor on many matters. And this is coordination. They appointed me as coordinator, head of USA Refugees and Immigrants. And now we have a group of organizations and social actors that carry out life in any number of organizations, not only the United Nations and the OAS, but particularly the organization you were through. We are lobbyists for Miami-Dade County, for Broward County, for Congress, for the Senate, for the United States. We lobby the 35 countries, 33 at this moment, of the Organization of American States. That is, it is not a secret. This is not a secret. You can look for it wherever you want. And I tell you something, right? As an organization, we could also act because they are denigrating and attacking one of our prestigious members. And well, they would have to show all the evidence, the nympho that you are, what they said you were, due to gossip from third parties or NGOs that also do not name them. They do not name who told them this, who told them that. Just gossip as if they were not a serious organization. That is what it seems to me, that they are demonstrating a lack of Norwegian seriousness by having organizations like this, that not only is it about to violate the right of a person and a group of people such as the family of Luis Parra and his, that is, not only him, but his extended family, including his mother, are about to be sent to the guillotine to Venezuela.
Well, but here there is a detail that must be highlighted. It's easy to figure out what's behind it. At the time, as I said at the beginning here in this meeting, I sent a communication addressed to Gonzalo and myself, referring to the issue of Luis Guillermo Parra Navas, and on behalf of a group that is simply a kind of WhatsApp group that we mesmeng. We define public force in exile, where we give guidance, because I am in several spaces, in addition to duly registered organizations such as those that are de facto. And 2 weeks after I sent that letter, what coincidence is it that that letter refers to a prestigious organization related to human rights in Venezuela? Who provided the information? They are mentioning me, they mention Luis Guillermo Parra Navas, and they mention the public force in exile. And what a coincidence that the previous few days, as I already said, I had sent a communication to Gonzalo Emio in those same terms, where I identified myself as the member of the public force in exile. In my capacity as an advisor, I speak in vain because I'm doing some criticism there of some statements made by González Mio, where they make an accusation against this person. So I made a complaint. They didn't respond to me. And well, what a coincidence that Landinfo, I did not know the existence of this organization, which works together with bodies of the Norwegian migration system, mentioned me, and this organization did not even take the initiative to contact William Jimenez, that anyone he. He goes on Google and puts in lawyer, William Jimenez Gaviria. Well, all my open networks appear because I go around without hoods and without censorship, full name, telephone number, address, everything.
It's obvious that what they want is to harm you with everything you've already achieved. That's obvious. That's why I'm telling you, you definitely have to file a lawsuit against them if I were you, even though our legal advisors always tell us that the best fight is the one you don't have. This is a very important damage to reputation. And this is, look, and we also return to constitutional law. And once again, I return to the ignorance of this type of immigration work that is showing a capable look, and they're super qualified. But in this case, they are being the ignorant ones of life. That is, how come you're going to tell me that public force in exile does not exist? Look for public force in exile and tell me how long it has existed. Because it is one thing for it to exist in fact, and another for it to exist in law. But it exists in fact. That I do not have a registered document does not mean that it does not exist, and it says that it does not exist. That it does not exist. So it shows great ignorance and it's like they want to harm you. There are terrors there, right?
Now we must highlight something here, because we always have to contribute elements to knowledge. When we are talking about human rights, and I never forget the tutorials, the classes of a brilliant person like Dr. Marisa Silva, a specialist in human rights, and just as you are also a specialist in human rights laws. Look, here it must be highlighted that in human rights we must first specify who the actors are, the state and the people. Who violates human rights? It will always be the state, Now what happens if people are subjects of law? What is Luis Guillermo Parra Navas? A natural person, a citizen, this person. Because I'm not going to go into details about the content or the eloquent manner or how he has handled himself publicly on the networks. But it turns out that he has had a high public exposure, that anyone who do that kind of thing on social networks from Venezuela, in hours, in minutes, you will be arrested, tortured, disappeared if no one finds out, even executed. So something needs to be specified here. If Luis Guillermo Parra Navas is returned to Venezuela, the criminal forum will be co-responsible for anything that happens to Luis Guillermo Parra Navas. Because if they have contributed to harming a person or anyone, and then dress up as Cinderella in the name of human rights, here we are faced with a situation that is alarming and worrying. But I do know that there are many people who will not be surprised by these things. There is also a theme here in the background. What's going on? What was incorporated? What was facilitated? Thanks to all the documents that I was able to send to the office of the prosecutor's office of the International Criminal Court, in addition to the entire photographic record, which, by the way, there is a deputy who also brought photos. The prosecutor he fled from Venezuela, which is in Spain, he also contributed some things there, just as Dr. Tamara Suf has done. In other words, here it is not just one issue. There have been many people who have contributed their grain of energy. So I think they are worried. Are you worried about what? That there is no clarity in the investigations. That there is no justice for Venezuela. Because they want the game to continue in Venezuela, to continue billing in the name of human rights and receive, of course, all those contributions. We are not against them receiving what they receive, but we have to put things in context. You cannot, in the name of human rights, harm other people because I like you, because I don't like you, because it's not convenient for me, because it's not in your interest, and you are putting at risk a person who can be subjected to torture of those things that you yourself are later defending. Because look at what happened with Gabriel Navas. They did the same with Gabriel Navas, and they are so shameless that after Gabriel Navas was detained there in Serin, the Penal Forum came out to provide services to the family. The first thing I told my dad, don't even think about allowing the Penal Forum to exercise representation because they are humiliating and achieving what they wanted. They managed to get it sent from Norway.
And it is important to clarify that we do not want to fight with any organization. All organizations have their space and are welcome to participate wherever they are. We are all free to receive the money that countries or organizations or citizens wish to donate to us. However, it must be clarified that we cannot interfere with each other because if we are defenders of human rights, how are we going to expose a person to torture, to cruel and degrading treatments? The question is that if you are an organization that defends human rights, which no, I don't. It is an organization, in my point of view, that we are talking about, of lawyers, but not human rights defenders as such. No, like you and I are, for example, or like our organization is, but it doesn't matter. It's okay to do it. But no human rights organization exposes a person to being murdered, tortured, and suffering harsh, cruel, and migrant treatment. But I'm going to read you something because I started by saying that the asylum is part of what it is called in law, youth cohesion. And I also told you that asylum and the right to be asylum is a pro-homing right that is relevant in the face of any other situation that the person has, since it is relevant in always the right of man, always the state, whatever it may be, has constitutionally or traditionally has to first respect the right of man to any other law that goes over his head and to any gossip, in this case about the nympho. What is a cogent use? The importance of use cogent, or international imperative law, derives from its content. Its norms protect essential values shared by the international community. It can be said that the use cogent is the legal embodiment of the moral conscience of international society. And many countries have already declared that asylum is a use cogent right. It is above any natural right that is in the constitution of any country, because it is above what your constitution and your laws say, because it is also pro-homing. First there is the right of man, and then the laws that man has made to defend himself or not, as a country or not.
Well, it seems to me that this is a very important port for the compression, because we are servers, precisely instruments of which we are also providing elements of information. So it is good to remember these things, especially Lewis Cohen, as you have explained with that clear definition, because the preeminence, and especially everything that has to do with this issue of human right, has a relevance and an importance, because the main human right fundamental is life. So there's no discussion here. There is nothing here that justifies anything or any maneuver where it is intended, for whatever reasons, that a person be exposed to torture and death. It's all a serious issue, contributing to a person being later tortured and what may happen to them. I believe that we are clear in everything we have shared, and we truly believe that, we will remain committed here, Dr. Carmen Jimenez.
Yes, and notice that a dear professor, who is still a member, he is one of the Human Rights Commissioners of the United Nations Human Rights Commission. He is one of the evaluators in the periodic country evaluation issue of the United Nations Human Rights Commission. And he said that man is always vis-a-vis the state. Man is always above, that is, before the state, compared to the state. Man and his rights are always above. So I thank you, dear brother, friend William Jimenez Gaviria, director of our organization for the Netherlands and part of Europe. Thank you. Thank you always for being there. To all those who are listening to us, a fraternal hug.